Tonight, a special edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Hurricane Milton has made landfall along the Gulf Coast of Florida. We will take you there live for the initial look at impacts along the Gulf Coast. Plus, ongoing recovery from Helene in the Carolinas, the latest on the disaster recovery, and we'll take you inside life in Asheville some 2 weeks after the storm. This is a special live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. And you are looking live at a WeatherStem camera over downtown Tampa, where Hurricane Milton just in the last few minutes making landfall as a strong Category 3 hurricane. Another record-breaking, historic, and impressive storm right now here live with you on the Carolina Weather Group on this Wednesday, October the 9th, 2024. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. We have Jared Smith in Charleston, South Carolina, Frank Strait in Columbia, South Carolina, down inside Milton, Carolina Weather Group chaser Dan Whitaker checking out damage and the initial impacts from the storm. And we'll be talking to our friend Evan Fisher in Asheville, North Carolina about life after Helene as recovery efforts continue across the Carolinas. We'll, of course, will be talking extensively about Helene recovery efforts, but we will start with that breaking news tonight as Milton has now made landfall as a strong Category 3. Frank, I think you're looking at that 8:30 update from the National Hurricane Center. What were they tracking as the storm came ashore?
They say it's made landfall at Siesta Key, which is in Sarasota County. I have the radar of the storm here. Let me get my hands on that and get my screen shared so that you can see it. Shazam, there it should be going. And Siesta Key is close to Sarasota, just to the west here. And you can see that's kind of right where the eye of the storm is now. Zooming back out so you can get a wide angle view. You can see pretty obviously here that Milton has become kind of lopsided here over the last several hours, and there's not a whole lot south and east of the center at this point. Most of it's off to the north and west and absolutely pummeling the Tampa metro area right now and Tampa Bay in general. So that it would have to say is where the worst of the storm is. They've issued a flash flood warning here recently. I wonder if that's an emergency. Let me pop that up here real quick. If I can make that happen. Why won't it happen? As I'm clicking on it, it's supposed to pop up, but it didn't. Oh, well. Oh, there it is. It's on my other screen. And no, it doesn't appear to be a flash flood emergency, but it does have the considerable tag on it. So obviously there's some widespread flooding going on there. So they're getting the wind, they're getting the extreme rain, they're getting the flooding there in Tampa. They're getting some certainly some high wind, damaging wind and rain elsewhere, but that's not where the worst of it is. It's Tampa and points north right now, James.
Thank you very much for that, Frank. We're taking live look right now in Tampa from a WeatherStem camera. We are really impressed to see so much of the WeatherStem network still online, still with power, still transmitting, and we can see that off here in the distance too. If I can have Frank take his screen share down, we're going to go on over to Dan Whitaker, who is out on the field, on the ground right now in Florida with an initial reaction to what you are seeing there, Dan. Dan, can you hear us?
Dan, you're muted.
You're muted, Dan.
Okay, thank you. So I'm here right now in Bradenton, Florida, and basically the backsides, give or take, of the eye wall starting to wrap back around. I've been in the eye for about half an hour now, being able to drive around and see what's happening. Basically a lot of trees down, debris all over the place, power outages intermittently. And I'm seeing some pictures and some reports of some building damage, a Bank of America in Bradenton missing a roof. But I haven't seen a whole lot of storm surge. I've been checking out the Sarasota Bay as much as I can and just not seeing a whole lot there. So overall, it does seem that this area fared better than we had originally kind of thought that it could in regards to storm surge, extreme flooding, extreme wind damage. Like I said, there is damage, but it's not widespread yet. Granted, we have the backside of the storm coming. Sometimes that can bring some really high wind gusts. So we're not through it yet. I'll give you a look here. I think it's there's a good kind of some wind happening as I'm driving along here, and I'm pulled over right now. You can see that the wind is whipping by, and it's definitely starting to pick back up again.
Dan, what are those driving conditions like with that wind out there right now?
It's been rocking around the car a lot. Definitely feels at times like I'm driving in an off-road vehicle on like an off-road trail. You can get this out here without the wind noise. Yeah, it rocks the car back and forth. Some of the gusts have been pretty extreme, to say the least. But this building doesn't look like it's in okay shape so far. Let's see here. Oh, our ATM still has power.
Dan is checking out right now this local Bank of America branch for potential damage is what he was hearing. Him and other storm chasers are down there right now assessing. You know, this is an area of Florida that was evacuated out, and we hope that a lot of people heeded that warning. So I can tell you from experience that it's storm chaser pictures and videos right now that people may be latching on to try to find out exactly what is happening back near home. Jared Smith, you've got the radar up on your screen. Maybe you could do us a little velocity analysis and help Dan and I see what some of the radar estimated winds are right now as this eye coming ashore less than an hour ago in this community just south of Tampa.
All right. I did the Scotty. All right. So we're 2 for 2 tonight. I'm not unmuting properly, but yeah, let's talk about this because this is we're kind of zoomed in right now. This is the Tampa radar. And yeah, as you can see, you know, just the lashing from the eye wall here right now up into Brandon, Florida, St. Petersburg. I mean, that is a real lashing there. And so we'll me get the scenes out here and let's just take a look at the velocity data, and it's pretty extreme. And as we kind of went through during Helene, the radar is actually having some trouble with aliasing. But yeah, so here's 84 outgoing, 83 incoming, and here's the radar site right there. So these are very close. Here's 103 miles an hour. Here's 113, and of course, as we get further away from the radar, there, it's going to speed up a little bit because friction does its thing. But just some incredible winds, and I can't imagine what this would have looked like. Actually, we can imagine what it looked like because the ground-based radar in off the Yucatan was able to monitor Milton as it was making that first run towards Category 5. It is remarkable.
Yeah, let's bring back in our panel, and certainly, Dan, if you see or spot any damage, jump in and let us know. But Frank, I know you were watching closely the impressive and scary rapid intensification that we saw with Milton over the Gulf. For anybody that may have missed it or is looking to learn a little bit more, can you give us a little summary of that?
We're all doing it now. That's 3 consecutive Scotty Powells in a row. Anyway,
that's a hat trick of a Scotty Powell.
Yeah, at least I got it right the first time earlier. But anyway, yes, that was a really incredible rate of intensification that we saw from Milton in its early stages. It went from becoming, well, just barely being a tropical storm to Category 5 in about 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Just a really incredible rate of intensification, among the highest that we've ever seen, and it was really amazing to watch that on satellite pictures, to watch this little blob of clouds become a compact hurricane with a pinhole eye and 160-mile-an-hour winds. That's something that you don't see very often, and we've only observed a few times. But that happened, and then of course it skirted the Yucatan Peninsula. It went through what's called an eye wall replacement cycle in there as well, which mature hurricanes, they have a new eye wall develop concentrically outside the original eye wall, and then the inner eye wall will decay, and the outer eye wall will eventually take over and become the new eye of the storm. That was a process that took the better part of a day to go through, and it resulted in the winds getting weaker for a time, but then it became a Category 5 hurricane once that eye wall replacement cycle completed, and it started moving over some really warm water over the far southeastern Gulf of Mexico there. That kind of assisted in that re-intensification process, but it didn't get quite as strong as it did during that first run. So yeah, that rate of intensification was pretty amazing, and one almost for the record books there.
Yeah, the picture we're looking at right now on the top of our screen for viewers with us live on YouTube and on Facebook, this is downtown Atlanta, courtesy of WeatherStem. And you can see right now that camera is bouncing. This camera is elevated. It looks like maybe it's up on a rooftop or a tower. The observation station right now from WeatherStem giving us data, winds blowing out of the north, sustained at 30 miles an hour, gusting up to 64 miles an hour. That's going to be likely higher as the storm continues to move off to the north and to the east. You can see as we make the pictures full screen, again, the way the wind is blowing that rain across the picture. You can also, of course, see what the wind is doing to the camera mount and dancing that camera around. I want to talk a little bit about the winds, what we're seeing with Milton, and actually how they relate back to Helene, because Helene was a storm that impacted Florida before impacting the Carolinas. And we have this comment from YouTube. And Dan, stand by because I want to get your take on this. The comment is, the amount of household debris taken from homes and put roadside is immeasurable. Can't help but wonder what the surge is going to end up like. Dan, as you're driving around right now there in Bradenton in the south side of Tampa down towards Sarasota, are you seeing a lot of debris from the last storm? And is that a flying projectile threat in the current storm?
I haven't seen a whole lot myself. Granted, I don't know if where I am has seen a whole lot of storm surge in the prior storms. So it's kind of hard to tell if there was debris around here. They did a good job moving it out. I want to kind of detour real quickly to show here. I've come upon some damage here. You can see there's a big sign, shopping center sign.
This would be like a sign that lists all the businesses that are a part of the shopping center. It's on its side here, huh?
Yeah, that's right. We'll see if we can get a little bit of a better look here. It's a little windy out.
If you're able to tell us safely, I'm sure the viewers would want to know exactly what the shopping center is called for anybody that might be a local. I think we may have lost Dan's audio. Are you still with us, Dan? So we can see Dan's picture, and you can actually see that what I presume to be metal on the side of that sign still blowing around there in the wind as Milton works its way on shore. Dan's getting back in his car right now, and we'll see if we can regain audio with him. Dan, you got us?
Okay, there we go. I was howling out there, to say the least.
Yeah, were you able to see what the name of the shopping center is?
See, there's a. See if we can get that shot again.
As we look down the roadway here, yeah, certainly. You know, it's pretty impressive also that you're able to get a signal out from inside this storm, which just less than an hour ago came ashore as a strong Category 3. I also want to point out we've got another comment here that came into chat that I thought was worth sharing. If I can remove Dan's spotlight and bring in back the rest of our panel, there was a question of I don't know if you've seen the tornadoes starting today around 2:30 in the west coast of Florida. And actually, I would say they even started before that in central and east coast of Florida. They were captured on DOT cameras. You guys can see them on your screen right now if you're watching with us on YouTube and on Facebook. I mean, this was like storm chasing out in the plains because of how flat portions of the Everglades and the flat terrain there, the swampy nature of Florida. You could see these tornadoes miles away, and the operators of the Florida DOT cameras spotting these funnels, one of them crossing a roadway at one point. I didn't hear of any injuries as a result of these tornadoes, but so impressive. I mean, it looked like something straight out of a movie or out of even a video game. That was really, really impressive as Milton, hours ahead of tonight's landfall, started spinning up these tornadoes. Frank, I know you've had a chance to kind of look things over a bit here, and we can see the total tornado warning count on the screen right now. What you're looking at, if you're watching our visual product, is the overlay of all those tornado warnings from the National Weather Service office. Is this Jared or Frank's screen that we're looking at?
That's mine.
Okay, so Frank, you've been watching these impacts, these real world impacts from Milton. What were you thinking as you were watching all this play out today?
That's the first thing that jumped on me is when I was looking at it this morning is that there's a really good setup for tornadoes across Florida today, and the Storm Prediction Center was on that. They had an enhanced risk out for a lot of Central and South Florida, sort of like what they had for a lot of South Carolina and into North Carolina with Helene moving through. But I think the setup was even better for Florida than it was for us because the sun was peeking through. Helene was approaching, or rather Milton was approaching during daylight. So we were making the low levels unstable, and there was a lot of shear and present because that's what hurricanes do. They generate a lot of shear in the low levels of the atmosphere, especially that the lowest 500 meters, that like 1,500 feet or so. When you have a lot of shear in that very bottom layer of the atmosphere there, and instability to go with it, and an environment where you get thunderstorms, you're going to get some tornadoes and potentially some bad ones, and that's what happened today, and there were a slew of tornadoes. I mean, you can see all the warnings. There was 50-something tornado warnings,
At least.
and as you can see, a lot of them ended up hitting the same areas over and over again. There was a few little areas there, and parts of the area south of Melbourne there, and south or northwest of Lake Okeechobee that were under 9, 10, and then all the way up to 13 tornado warnings for a time today, and there. I mean, I saw there were a lot of tornado debris signatures on radar, and saw a lot of social media videos of the tornadoes that touched down. There probably were at least 20 tornadoes in Florida today associated with Milton.
Yeah, and actually, I will point out because a moment ago I said I wasn't familiar with any fatalities, and some of you in the comments have accurately pointed out to us that Port St. Lucie is reporting about an hour or so ago. The sheriff there, they had multiple fatalities that they were attributing to a tornado outbreak from Milton today. Sometimes the word fatalities doesn't give us a clear indication of exactly how or when or even how many multiple might be, but it does certainly seem like those tornadoes could have been having a deadly impact even ahead of that 8:30 p.m. landfall from Milton that came, again, less than an hour ago as we continue with you live here on the Carolina Weather Group. In just moments, we will talk with Evan Fisher about what life is like in Asheville after Helene as we will refocus back on our home turf. But Dan Whitaker, I see you've come to a stop here inside a shopping center. I'm just wondering if you've got your eyes on anything in particular. Dan's currently on mute. I can also see that he's got a low signal with us right now.
Is the shot clear, James?
Yeah, we got you. What are you looking at here, Dan?
So basically, I'm in front of a shopping center, and the wind is just howling now. I hope you all can see this as much as it is, but there is debris blowing by. The car is rocking, and the wind is just going every crazy direction here as it kind of bounces off of this building. So definitely things have picked back up again. I think what we'll be seeing is more issues with power outages, wind damage. I mean, with wind speeds like what I'm seeing right now, there's going to be a lot more trees down.
Yeah, and again, I think it's been so impressive when we've looked at the shots that you're providing us. We can see the power still on. We're still looking at weather stem cameras back closer to the Tampa area, and those are still transmitting with power on. It's been pretty impressive to see how the Florida infrastructure has been holding up so far with this landfall of the Category 3 hurricane. Jared, Frank, anybody have some other thoughts they'd like to get in before we shift back here to our home turf?
Frank,
I
you're
think
muted.
There we go. Now I'm hopefully unmuted again. I've done it twice. Anyway, looking at my screen share here, I will go over some observations that we've seen from the area airports around Tampa.
Sure.
Tampa recently has had an 82-mile-an-hour wind gust. Let's see, 86 miles an hour at Whitted Airport, which is close to Tampa as well. St. Petersburg, they had an 81-mile-an-hour wind gust at 8:26, and it looks like they've stopped reporting. So maybe the anemometer's damaged there, or the weather station has lost power or something. Sarasota, earlier at 7:53, they had a 93-mile-an-hour wind gust. That was out of the east. The wind has since turned to the northwest since they're on the backside of the storm now, and the wind's starting to pick up there once again as well. So maybe we'll see some stronger gusts. Venice, Florida, 68-mile-an-hour gust. That's south of Sarasota. So that's kind of a quick rundown of the airport observations, James.
I appreciate that, Frank. Yeah, and we'll continue to get data in. Those airports being the official observation point for so much of the weather service backbone of the network. Then we've got places like WeatherFlow and WeatherStem that are also going to add in on top of that additional observations. So it's we're lucky in the sense that we've got so many different tools in order to kind of monitor what's going on out there. I think we may have lost Dan for a moment. Not too surprising when you consider what those conditions are like. We will continue to keep a close eye on this as the storm works its way on shore, and we'll watch for updates from the Hurricane Center, from the local National Weather Service office that is continuing to track already initial reports of downed trees in Sumter, Florida, one on a structure, power losses throughout the south part of that county there in Sumter County, Florida. And I think that's just a snapshot of what we're going to see as this storm continues to make its way quickly across central Florida. Heavy rains already coming down in Orlando, the Villages, down towards Daytona Beach. All of this associated with Milton. Frank, you mentioned it before with that eye wall replacement cycle. After the storm kind of went through that cycle, it maybe wasn't able to regain Category 5 strength, but it got bigger in terms of size.
Right. That's what typically happens with these eye wall replacement cycles. It results in a bigger eye taking over, and so the storm starts to grow in size because of that. But that's only one of the reasons why Milton's been getting bigger over time. It's starting to make the transition, as you could tell by the radar appearance that you saw earlier, with the storm starting to get lopsided a little bit. That's another signal that we're seeing this sort of evolve from being a hurricane, a tropical cyclone, to an extratropical cyclone, the kind of storm that we typically see in the mid latitudes, which has different characteristics. It can still be pretty intense and can cause effects like a hurricane sometimes, but it's a different beast, so to speak. And so Milton's in the process of turning into one of those now, and extratropical cyclones, they tend to have a much larger wind field. They have a much bigger diameter, and the strongest winds aren't necessarily right near the center. So that's the transition that is underway. It'll take another day or two for that to complete with Milton, but still, that's what's going on now, and that's the reason why those the storm's getting bigger, and strong winds are occurring further away from the center.
We've got a question on YouTube right now. Looks like the weather is clearing down to the south across portions of southern Florida. And that is true. After being hit really hard on the tornado side of this outbreak earlier today, the weather is clearing up there. I'm sure they still have, of course, debris and things to tend to and damage and power outages. But yes, the heaviest rain right now is from the I north, all the way up towards the Big Bend, just outside of Jacksonville. It'll be there before the night's out. You can even see heavy rain right now if you were to be standing on the Space Coast looking out to sea. You can see special marine warnings have been posted for these thunderstorms out here that I'm sure are capable of producing water spouts themselves. And speaking of the Space Coast, another impact from the storm is that the crew up at the International Space Station that was set to return home being held up there in space because, of course, NASA and SpaceX were concerned about bringing them back down to Earth given the inclement weather. And so they'll stay up there a little while longer. We will wait to see if we get Dan back because we'd love to check back in with him before tonight's live program has wrapped up. We are continuing to watch the data that is coming in, the reports that are coming in. I will say that kind of anecdotally, I am starting to lose some of our cameras. It seems like this WeatherStem camera here is seemingly still up, but a couple of them have gone down, or at least temporarily. That is to be expected with any of the infrastructure. We've lost Dan with some of the cameras. Maybe would be next. We'll be watching for power outages as well too. But of course, the WeatherStem system that we use here on the Carolina Weather Group does have some of these on backup power, on cellular networks, and alternative connections. And so I'm hoping that a lot of these will be able to stay up. They have a great network across Florida, as we've seen in their home turf. And that is something we'll be keeping a close eye on here. But as we look at the screen share right now, we can see exactly where some of the heaviest rain is. And it's just now moving into downtown Tampa on that kind of western eye wall.
That's right, and that is now a flash flood emergency that's going on there in the Tampa area. That's the highlighted polygon you see there covering Tampa and the Tampa Bay and vicinity because of the extreme rainfall they've seen. So again, a particularly dangerous situation for flooding in that area, in addition to the high winds that are ongoing. Definitely a time to be hunkered down in a spot that is not prone to flooding, for sure.
Yes, and I will use that as a transition as we will continue to keep a close eye on everything that is happening. A lot of this, I'm sure, is unwanted deja vu for Evan Fisher, friend of the show, joining us from Asheville, North Carolina, as we've been providing you with continuous coverage of the impacts from Helene. Flooding and flash flood emergencies, something they are certainly not strangers of, and it's been nearly 2 weeks since Helene came ashore in Florida and brought devastating flooding to the Carolinas, as well as Georgia, Virginia, Tennessee, and of course portions of Florida. Taking a look here at aerial video shared by Duke Energy, you can see at its peak the flooding there in Asheville, which was brought on both by Helene and a predecessor rain event, which started officially 2 weeks ago tonight, right here as we were on the Carolina Weather Group. Some of the first bands of heavy rain, some of those first tornado warnings moving into the Carolinas as we were watching a Blowing Rock, North Carolina tornado warning 2 weeks ago tonight, believe it or not. And so let's bring in Evan, who, Evan, we were telling you before the show that we're very excited to see your face, see that you're sitting in light, see that you're healthy and well, because you're somebody who posts a lot on Twitter. And when you went into the radio blackout, as so much of Western North Carolina did, I know I experienced a lot of anxiety waiting to hear from you, waiting to hear from Dan, to find out exactly what your situations were like. So first and foremost, how are you doing, Evan?
Well, I would say we're incredibly blessed. I'm in a location in East Asheville, specifically Black Mountain, that got power reliably about 3 days ago. So we were without power for 10 days. I believe it's the final number. And then we just got water yesterday. Now it's not drinkable water. We don't expect drinkable water for a long time. But compared to where we were 10 days ago, we almost feel normal. Now, compared to where we were 20 days ago, we're in an entirely different world. Asheville just is not the same as it was pre-storm, and to be honest, it will never be the same again. But we are making huge strides towards a new normal.
Yeah, I guess I've been wondering a lot, given the fact that so much of the mountains of North Carolina, some of the areas that were hit hardest, maybe not exclusively, I don't want to leave out other areas, but, with the terrain there in Western North Carolina, we saw mudslides, we saw road access issues, we saw communication issues. And so there was an extra layer of anxiety because we weren't able to reach a lot of those people for a long period of time. I've been wanting to ask you, what is life like inside the disaster zone? Because for the longest time, there was this divide between the inside and the outside not being able to communicate with each other.
And I would even say there was a divide between the inside and the inside. We just had no clue what was going on inside of our own communities for the first 48 hours. I have no qualms with the federal response, as there's lots of conspiracy theories that go around. But I will say for the first 48 hours, we felt very alone. There was no water to go around. There had no cell service for 48 hours. We had no idea what happened in the other parts of Western North Carolina. And there was no help anywhere to be found. You couldn't go to Ingalls, and the National Guard wasn't here yet delivering water. Wasn't really, I guess it was right around hour 48 that we first started seeing that support come in and having some water. And that's just a consequence of the fact that Western North Carolina was cut off from the world, not just because we had no cell service, but you could not get up the interstates. I-40 was blocked both directions. 26 was washed out and blocked both directions. We were inaccessible. So it's so bizarre to look back on because those first 48 hours were surreal. Just the first few hours after the storm, it was really bad in our location in Black Mountain. We were in the floodwaters of the Swananoa River at one point, and we were extremely lucky to not lose our cars or lose our homes. But shortly thereafter, my parents, who don't even know exactly where we are right now because we just had to move, managed to find our house, and they were shook to the core by whatever they had seen between their home in South Asheville and where we are in Black Mountain. And I didn't understand why until the next day when I went to their home to help them gut their basement because of some flooding. And the scenes between Black Mountain and Swananoa and Fairview were horrific. And this is before any of the help had showed up. It was just slowly putting the pieces together of what had happened around us in all of Western North Carolina.
We're looking right now on YouTube and on Facebook. Those viewers are able to see, Evan, one of what I think is maybe the last or second to last Twitter post you posted on the 27th, that Friday morning at about 9 a.m. of the river flowing what looks to be right over your back fence.
Yeah.
What is going through your mind as you're watching this river rush by within inches of your property?
Yeah, that was a heart-stopping moment. I'm a meteorologist, and my specialty has always been Western North Carolina weather. So I thought that I knew what these storms were capable of going into this. And in fact, I think we nailed the rainfall forecast, but the impacts were just totally unexpected. And in that moment when I saw that water, I'd been up since midnight checking every 10 minutes over the fence because we're just right across the street from the Swananoa River. I've been checking every 10 minutes to see where the water was, to make sure we were going to be okay and we could evacuate to higher ground if needed. And for most of the morning, there was no water to be seen. The Swananoa was somewhat, it wasn't calm, it was raging, but it was still on the other side of the street. And then in one 10-minute window, it went from 60 yards away to raging against the back fence. It must have come up 5 to 10 feet in those 10 minutes. And I stepped outside and I could immediately hear the roar of the river. And I realized, oh no, it's already too late. We can't get out.
I guess that's also what I'm wondering is, trying to sleep during this very long event. Is that even possible to sleep?
Maybe for the normal people, it's interesting to consider that because I've talked to folks around here who they're not as weather savvy as I am, and they maybe didn't understand the gravity of the forecast that was at hand. And they'll talk about they woke up when the power went out, and then they put their noise machine on and just went back to sleep. But I was unbelievably anxious, and we had been for days leading up to the storm, but I didn't sleep a wink. The wind and rain were blasting against the side of the house all night. So I think I finally got out of bed around 3 or 4 and gave up the whole in and out of bed routine and just got up and made coffee. But I didn't sleep. Others did. Unfortunately, it really all started in the night, which is difficult, as we all know, for these severe hazards. When you don't have eyes to see the water coming up, that's really how you get yourself in a bad spot.
You mentioned, Evan, communication issues inside communities.
Mhm.
I'm going to keep referring to it as the inside and the outside once the cutoffs happened. Outside, I had the pleasure of being on the outside here in Charlotte. We dodged a bullet. The impacts really started from Interstate 77 from the Catawba River over to the west. So where I am in Matthews, besides some heavy rain, we were fine. So I have the lovely privilege of being out here in the outside world where we're hearing all of the conspiracy theories that you mentioned. The conspiracy theories about who's responding, who's not responding, who's sabotaging, who's not sabotaging, who's controlling weather, who's not controlling weather. We could do a whole hour on those. But let me ask you, inside, are you guys hearing those same conspiracy theories, or is there just no time for that?
You really have to split it into two different parts of this event. There were different types of conspiracies in the first 5 days than there were in the second 5 days. I think early on it had a lot more to do with just out of control rumors because there was no reliable news getting in or out of Western North Carolina. The second 5 days, some of those rumors took hold and just grew into this massive conspiracy against the government, against weather manipulation, and I mean, I'll just tell you from on here on the ground, FEMA has been here from the moment they were able to get here, and I just from one Western North Carolina resident to the world, we're unbelievably grateful for that response because we would have been real thirsty by Sunday, Monday if people hadn't shown up, and they flew in on helicopter. We've had helicopters landing nonstop near the house for a week and a half, 2 weeks now. So all of those conspiracy theories that you hear, there's always some element of truth because there's always misunderstandings between groups of people in these things, and that just gets blown up. It's just not true, folks. Stick to what you're hearing on the ground, and if you hear somebody I say this because I saw on Twitter a Black Mountain resident who was spewing the same conspiracies that we're hearing. So they're just adding fuel to that fire by being an on the ground person. I'm here in Black Mountain. I can tell you that person's full of baloney. So if you hear from someone on the ground saying that, oh yeah, the government's not here, it's all locals, they're pulling thousands of bodies out of the river, that stuff is not true. It's a really bad situation, but the government has been here to help.
Evan, what can we do now? What can best help you guys right now?
That's the best question I've heard in a while. Yeah, so the rush of supplies was wonderful, and it could almost bring me to tears how many people have just shown up with all of their love for Western North Carolina to give us the supplies that we needed early on and lend a helping hand when you just couldn't go anywhere because there were trees down, all the roads were blown out. People showed up in the first 10 days. Now we're entering I would say, a transition period where we are totally saturated, at least the main tributaries along I-40 and I-26, the Black Mountains, Swannanoas, Asheville's of West North Carolina, totally saturated with water and food. And in fact, it's becoming a bit of a burden on some of these distribution centers like churches and breweries that are operating as distribution centers. It's just really difficult to handle the logistics. So how you can help moving forward, wait and fill specific needs as you can. So specific needs will arise again. We're currently doing our very best to organize the distribution so that we don't have these backlogs like we've had over the last few days of just too many supplies. But we're also changing seasons. So those needs are going to change as the season changes. There's people in these hills that won't have power for months, and some may not see it until in some of the hardest hit areas next spring or next summer, if those locations even come back. So folks will need generators. They'll need winter coats to go through the winter. My suggestion on all of those, if you already have winter coats, if you already have generators, you want to donate them, great. Find the specific place to do it, someone who's asking for it. If not, donate money because we really need people to help us on our terms. And there's been a lot of folks who have come up and they want to help. They only want to help on their terms, and I appreciate the gusto. But it's just complicates things. So if you can donate money, it allows the organizations who are already in Western North Carolina to use that as we need it in the weeks and months to come.
On the screen
Yeah.
right now, we have a QR code to donate to the American Red Cross Disaster Relief Fund organized by your weather pods, the Carolina Weather Group, Chaser Chat, Stormfront Freaks, Weather Brains. We know there are other organizations out there, some really local to Asheville, some really local to Boone. If you'd like to donate to those two, we of course would welcome that, but we also want to provide you with a reliable option here if you're looking for a place to spend your money where you know it is going to be a safe and secure transaction that is available to you tonight. In the last couple of weeks, we want to thank all of our weather podcast listeners across all of those shows for raising multiple thousands of dollars, couple thousands of dollars now to help with the American Red Cross effort. So we appreciate that. Jared, let me go back down to you in Charleston.
Yeah. You mentioned the need for winter coats. You mentioned that, Evan, you mentioned, it's going to get cold there actually pretty soon. I mean, the seasons are changing as we speak. We've got some cooler high pressure that's going to move in, and what's the vibe on the ground about that right now?
Yeah, at the moment, we're just it's this transition period that's so difficult. It makes it hard to really even judge that while being on the ground. There are a lot of places that aren't even accepting winter clothes at the moment because there's just such a backlog. But the vibe, if you will, is certainly that we're going to need that going into the winter. I mean, it's going to be widespread upper 30s, low 40s over the next few nights, and we're already into fall. So people will need. Oh my goodness. Is that our first freeze? I mean, we could have our first freeze inside of 7 to 10 days. That's going to be a problem. And honestly, one of the things that worries me, and I don't know there's a solution for this, but there are a lot of people who are getting their water from creeks and springs up in the mountains right now who don't have any expectation of pipe water flowing through their pipes in the next 6 months. And if we have a hard, cold winter, that'll start to freeze up, and there's going to be some difficult situations. So we just have to keep asking people to continue to help, continue to show up, however we need that. And I promise you, we'll tell you how we need it as those needs arise. But we're going to need help for months to come.
Evan, was the GFS forecast 2 meter minimum temperatures for Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning. Okay, so next
Right.
week, I saw my first low 40s this morning. It felt wonderful to me, but I have power and heat, and just feel for the people up the mountain who don't and won't.
Right. Take this morning and drop about 10 degrees from it for Wednesday morning. It's looking like it'll be your first freeze for Western North Carolina of the season. And it gets chilly elsewhere too. I mean, thankfully, the power is back over almost all of South Carolina now, but looks like we'll see some lows in the 36 to 40 range in the upstate, maybe some frosty spots.
Wow. It's funny in all of this aftermath, I've checked the weather every single day of my life for 18 years, and I found myself not really checking the weather much right now. I know it's going to be dry, so I'm just going 6 hours at a time.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but that would have been the most difficult thing for me if I would have had to go without power for days. I would not been able to look at the weather for days, and that would drive me insane.
Well, and that's speaking of the rumors and conspiracies, you really hit on something there, Frank, because in the days immediately following the storm, the rumor around town, well, we had no service to verify, was that Hurricane Milton, although we didn't know what its name was at the time, would be coming into West North Carolina. And there
Right.
was a lot of panic for days when we
There
couldn't
was a lot
contact
of
the outside
social
world.
media buzz, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's another storm is coming up," and
Exactly.
there was like one or two ensemble members that were showing that out of all of the ensembles, so like two or three out of like 100 different ensemble members that were
Yeah.
showing that
Well, we'll take the high
possibility.
pressure and the cold air over another massive
Right,
landslide and flood
right.
event for sure.
And actually, the weather looks like it's going to stay generally quiet for a while. And let me bring my screen share up again here and show you all one more thing. This is the GEFS ensemble total rainfall from the 18Z run today. And this is total rainfall over the next 16 days, the ensemble mean. Not much rain.
No.
Looks like we might have one or two minor rain events over the next 2 weeks and 2 days. So it looks like it's going to stay mainly dry, which is good if you're trying to recover from a hurricane. But on the other hand, let's keep in mind we've been in a feast or famine kind of setup for precipitation for months now. And so it's been real dry for a long time, and then we get a hurricane or something else to put down a ton of rain and flood everybody out, and then it gets dry again and stays dry for a long time. And a lot of the water that's fallen, when it has fallen, is kind of run off. So we're not necessarily putting a ton of water into the water tables everywhere. I mean, some places, yes, for sure, but if you're getting 20 inches of rain. But if it's 20 inches of rain in 2 days, you're still having a lot of it run off, and it's not exactly the greatest for your overall hydrological situation, especially when it decides to turn dry again and stay dry for a month after the big storm.
Yeah, and I would say that that's a concern as well because
Yeah.
we like moderation, but we have had an unbelievable amount of tree fall up here. I mean, there are some locations, I would say the average is maybe 5 to 10% tree fall, which is still a really high number when 5 to 10% of your trees fall in a forest. But there are some places up here that have had 50 to 80% tree fall on some of these windward slopes. And some of the concern moving forward, and maybe not this fall, because we have a lot of drying out to do before it's really a problem. But there's going to be a wildfire concern when we have our next big drought, that there is a ton of fuel,
Yeah.
and it will be
And
dry fuel on the ground, and
Yeah,
that
and
maybe the
that worries
spring.
me too because it's going to be a La Nina winter, and La Nina
Yeah,
winters tend to be dry in the southeast.
exactly.
If we don't get a lot of rain and we go into a drought, it'll be a more gradual process than what happened over the summer, if that's the way it goes. But yeah, it does tend to be dry, especially in January and February,
Yeah.
especially in February, actually, during La Nina winters. That's not what you want. If you get, a drought in place and then several dry and windy days in a row,
Yeah.
when we get to March and April, then that could be a really bad wildfire situation, especially with a lot of extra fuel laying on the forest floors right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Evan, thinking about those weeks and months ahead, we had you on the show just weeks ago talking about Explore fall foliage, the upcoming big economic
Yeah.
boost that comes to the mountains this time of year. That's unfortunately another disaster that is going to be playing out, is that loss of economic dollars.
It is. Yeah, and that is maybe the hottest topic right now in Asheville, as government officials are doing their best to keep people away, and business owners and TDAs want everyone to come to Western North Carolina and bring their money. And I can't fault either side. They both make perfect sense. Our back roads are a nightmare situation right now, and people shouldn't be up here. But our businesses are also going to need a lot of support, or this will be crushing for a lot of small businesses. So I don't know how this season will shake out. To be honest, I don't think that people will come up here the way they should. And there's no Blue Ridge Parkway, and parts of the Blue Ridge Parkway may not be accessible for a really, really, really long time. So that's going to be crushing. It's the most visited national park in the country, right? Or yeah, I think it is, right? The Blue Ridge Parkway and the Smokies. So anyways, I'm off track there, but that is
No,
a
yeah.
huge deal, and we'll just have to figure that out as we go. I keep encouraging people who want to come up and see the leaves. I just say, if you really want to come and see them, then come up and volunteer. You can register for Samaritan's Purse or some other volunteer organization. Come up for the day in mid to late October. You can work through that official organization who'll make sure you aren't getting into some dangerous back road situation. And you can look at the fall leaves around you while you help someone improve their life and recover after all this disaster. Unfortunately, it's just not going to be a normal season. And even if the roads were in good conditions, I'm looking across the mountain here in Black Mountain towards Craggy Gardens and Mount Mitchell, which are huge leaf peeping areas, and they are brown as brown can be. It looks like full-on winter up there. All the trees are either blown down flat or completely stripped.
Our viewers with us right now on Facebook and YouTube, you're looking at Parkway photos, the Blue Ridge Parkway photos from the National Park Service, which shows that destruction that Evan was just talking about. I'll tell you, Evan, when I first saw the advisory come out, it was just a text advisory, right? There weren't any pictures. And it was from the Park Service, and it said, Blue Ridge Parkway closed. And I thought, oh, sure, it probably has some downed trees and things, but this is probably just like, let's leave the tourists alone. Let's not entice them to come up here. Let's take away the Blue Ridge Parkway. Maybe I came up with my own conspiracy theory, if you will, but I kind of thought like, you know what, that's right. That should not be a priority right now. Then it was followed by these photos which showed the landslides and the damage to this road, which, by the way, this road is 100 years old in some places, or at least, you know, the cut. These photos are leaving me speechless, and I'm not doing that for dramatic pause or effect. Like, I'm looking at that picture right now, and you probably know the one where the pickup truck is stopped on the Blue Ridge, and the trees have either fallen or almost just look like they were sheared off because of I guess the winds up there, right? Up top the mountains were really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our estimate, and we're not going to have a good measurement of it because all those stations turned off in the middle of the storm, but there's a good chance those winds blew as strong as 130 miles an hour up there. And when we're still in the part of the season where that we have leaves on the trees, that is just way, way too much stress on each of those deciduous tree trunks. You know, I think that photo was taken around 4,000 feet. So that's 2,000 feet below the crest of our peaks. I haven't seen a single parks photo from above 5,000 feet yet, which are these really high traffic locations. So one of my concerns is maybe they're not able to get there because of landslides or washouts. But even if those roads were intact, the tree damage alone would take at least into November to clear out. And then it's wintertime. So we have our regularly scheduled 5 months of closure, and we got to restart again in the spring.
So Evan, the leaf peeping situation isn't good because the roads aren't good and there aren't really all that many leaves left on the trees anyway because of all those winds. What is there to do in Asheville and vicinity right now? Or is Sierra Nevada up and running and able to do tours? Or, I know Biltmore Village, that's probably a no-go area. The Moose Cafe, can I at least go to the Moose Cafe and get some biscuits?
That's a good question. To be honest, I don't know. And I'll tell you the biggest hang up with all of these spots is the water situation. We don't have potable water, and we don't expect the reports I've seen in the past week. I've seen estimates anywhere from a few months to a year before that returns. So all of these restaurants, all of these breweries that are huge tourism draws, and not just tourism, but as a local, I go there all the time as well. I love to go sit at Highlands or at some of these other local breweries on the French Broad that are probably no longer there. And without drinkable water or a really consistent supply of bottled water, which really is unsustainable at the restaurant level, they're not going to be able to operate as they normally do. So to answer your question, what is there to do? I honestly don't know if there's anything we've been trying to figure that out because I'm tired of doing work. And I'd just like a mental health day where I can go out and go do something that is not Helene related or trying to desperately catch up on school and work related. And I just can't come up and I haven't been able to find a single trail even that's open right now.
Yeah, this reminds me of another question. What's going on at UNCA? Are they even able to hold classes for the rest of the semester?
Yeah, so that's such a huge high impact event. Their next attempt at starting classes is supposed to be October 28th. So that's a full month and a day after the storm, which is a pretty catastrophic timeline. It's not like they're doing online classes right now. I don't even know how you continue with the normal semester. That's worse than the COVID situation was because at least we transitioned to online school back then. I don't know how they'll shake that out. There's all of these schools in West North Carolina are going to be in that same situation. Even the public and the primary and secondary schools, a lot of them are damaged. You know, the school I went to here in Swannanoa and where my little sister goes still as well is utterly destroyed. It will be months before they can even consider letting students back on the property. And honestly, some just unbelievably horrific things that happened on that property during and after the storm. So each and every one of those campuses in West North Carolina is going to have to evaluate how they get back to normal. And then they're going to have to bring their students back from Piedmont or the Midwest, where they've gone to enroll in other public schools in the meantime, so they can at least continue their education with extended family.
Evan, there's certainly a lot there, and I will give you my support and sympathy, which is, you're right. You know, you guys don't have the luxury of unplugging from this, because I will tell you again, as an outsider, somebody who's only looking at it on screens, I took one of those days on Monday. I'm going for a walk. I'm going to the park. I'm going to go see the sun. And I even realized at the time that was a luxury that a lot of folks don't have and won't have for a really long time.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. And it's one of the first things that the mayor of Black Mountain addressed in the days after the storm was we understand people need a mental health break during this time to go hike. So they're evaluating local small trails as they can to find something safe. But it's just a time where you have to take care of yourself and your loved ones because there's such a heavy weight amidst all this recovery.
We will count the blessings. We heard today from officials the death toll in North Carolina is a staggering 88 people. The number, of course, has only been slowly going up. We have over 200 people across the Southeast who have unfortunately lost their lives to Helene. Those numbers will go up when you think about the fatalities we already know about today with Milton and the tornado outbreak and the damage that that storm could still be inflicting as we speak right now in Florida. We did hear from the administrator of FEMA today, who assured North Carolina that FEMA resources on the ground in North Carolina are not leaving for Milton. FEMA will be spending other crews down. Of course, there have been some headlines, rightfully so, about FEMA funding and FEMA resources and staffing as any business or any operation, government or non-government, is experiencing right now. But I think they were trying to get the word out that those resources, as you've seen, Evan, and are acknowledging on the ground, have been there, will continue to be there. And most of all, I want to circle back to, I think, the first point we made when you hopped on the Zoom tonight. We are just so grateful that you're safe, that you're able to join us tonight. It's been really good to catch up with you. 2 weeks in the making, and I know many more weeks ahead. Don't be shy, Evan, to let us know, as Jared rightfully put it, what you guys need up there. We are all here to support, and this is a backyard hometown disaster, as we've seen here on the Carolina Weather Group. And I want you, Evan, and our audience to know we are not going to forget about the rebuilding process. It's going to take a long, long time to take place up there. So we will be relentlessly keeping an eye on that. That's a promise from this show, checking in with the communities, and not just Asheville, as we've seen in the comments here tonight. Yeah, we're talking a lot about Asheville. We're getting a chance to catch up with Evan, and in the greater Asheville area, Black Mountain and the like. But we know there are lots of other communities that are hurting too, and so we will be looking to do as much outreach to all of them. I mentioned a few moments ago we had the privilege of collaborating with other weather podcasts, from Stormfront Freaks to Chaser Chat to Weather Brains. It's been really uplifting as content creators to know that those other shows are competition, if you will. We're right there to hold us up, to jointly come together and help spread the word about the disaster recovery, whether you're donating to the American Red Cross or another organization. But they also had a chance to reach out to who they knew impacted by this disaster. Stormfront Freaks' Serena Arnold caught up with Scott Stevens, who told his story. He's a meteorologist in Nashville.
Hey, meteorologist Serena Arnold from the Stormfront Freaks podcast, and I am here with Scott Stevens. Scott Stevens is meteorologist by training. He is an Asheville resident, and he's also my absolute best friend in the entire world. Scott, you have seen what's been going on in Asheville from the ground in the sky. Talk to me about what you've seen and the severity of the situation there.
The word unprecedented gets thrown around a lot, and I'm not going to pretend like this is the first disaster that's ever befallen the United States or the first flooding event or anything like that, because, I mean, any meteorologist can remember Katrina. They can remember Harvey. It is unprecedented for Asheville. We have never had anything happen like this before. They told us before that this was going to surpass 2004, the floods that happened then. They told us it would surpass the 1916 Asheville floods. They did everything that they could to impress upon everybody the severity of this, and it all happened and then some. It broke every record that we've ever had. It broke the rainfall records. It broke the river level records. It broke the fatality records. So it is truly unprecedented. I don't think that anybody could have possibly been 100% prepared for what has happened to us in the last week.
Oh, I have complete goosebumps from those words, because I know, coming from you, how strong those words are. And you've got your power back, and you're one of the lucky ones. But it was after how many days or hours?
181 dark hours. Just
Not
over
like
a
you were
week.
counting.
Not like I was counting, not like we were all counting. And then again, I know that that happens in other places. You know, ice storms in the Midwest can frequently cause power outages that long, honestly, at worst times of year. But again, it is very uncharacteristic for here. Asheville frequently considers itself honestly pretty immune from most of what nature has to throw at us. We don't get severe weather like they do in the plains. We're 250 miles inland, so we don't get storm surge. We don't get terrible blizzards and ice storms. So this really broke the shield for us. It disillusioned a lot of people and reminded us that truly no place is entirely safe. So yeah, we were without power for 8 days. Some people were only without it for 3 or 4 days. There are tens of thousands of people in this county alone that still don't have it back, and here we are on day 10.
Yeah. And you've also mentioned water. You were talking about earlier when we were just talking personally, your kid's school, that's not going to reopen again until they have the water fixed. And even though you have power, you're still having to boil your water. I mean, it's more than just power.
It is. The power was honestly we talked about it the other day. We said of all the things we could have lost, we'd much rather have water but no power, as opposed to the other way around. The city of Asheville's water system was essentially destroyed. Several of the pipelines, several of the feeder valves and the feeder pipes have all been like they floated up out of the ground and got destroyed and floated down the river. So 80% of Asheville right now has absolutely no running water, period. Not just a boil water advisory. There's nothing but air coming out of their faucets. And that is why so much of the city is still reeling from this, and why the restaurants can't open, and why the schools can't open, and why the hospital, is running off of emergency water for as long as they can, because, like, the wind was one thing, but honestly, the disaster didn't start until after the wind died down.
I believe that. Now you're also a member of the Civil Air Patrol, and you're not, a search and rescue and relief missions aren't above what you're used to. You know this. Everyone's out there in full force. I know the Cajun Navy's out there and lots of people. So you've seen this also from the air. You've seen it from the search and rescue perspective too. Give us a glimpse of what you've seen.
I've seen things from the air that you cannot see from the ground, and quite honestly, that's the problem. There are places about 50 miles northeast of here is a much more rural county called Yancey County. There's a town there called Burnsville. Within that county, it is entirely valleys and gorges. The whole county is shaped by rivers that go between the mountains where all of this water was funneled. And what I saw flying over the other day is that there are entire communities north of Burnsville along the Cane River that are completely cut off. What used to be their one road that would get them in and out of civilization isn't just damaged, it's gone. Like there is a river there now where there used to be a roadbed. So 12, 20 houses at a time are essentially islands now. They cannot leave, and they're 20 miles from civilization, so even walking is not a realistic option. Their only way out now is by helicopter, and that's exactly what's been happening.
Wow. Okay, so to put the bow on this conversation, I honest to God have like goosebumps. This is horrific.
Sure is.
Why is it important that people donate?
Um, it's weird being on what I'll call the receiving end of a disaster relief. Like you said, I've worked in this world for a long time, and I'm used to coordinating these kind of, supply distribution points. It's surreal being on the side where you might actually have to go take advantage of some of those things. But the importance of donating really cannot be overstated right now because we are so isolated up here in the mountains. We're, an hour plus from any other major city. The interstates are blocked. It is proving extremely difficult for our normal channels of supply chain to function. The grocery stores are not supplied because they simply can't get trucks in here to supply them. Like I said, 80% of Asheville right now has no water. There are rural communities that are essentially washed away and still don't have power to 80+% of the city. And truly, these donation drives and what is turning into airdrops are quite literally the only method of survival for a lot of people right now. And we're just so far removed from, major metropolitan areas and so difficult to access that that's the only way that stuff is getting here right now. The grocery stores are reopened, they have power, and some of them even have water, but they don't have food.
Wow. Okay, well, you heard it from Scott. It's incredibly important. So whatever you can do for the people of Asheville and the surrounding areas, Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina, we know that it's a broad area. Do what you can to donate today.
Again, our thanks to Stormfront Freaks for putting that interview together, as well as the support from Chaser Chat and Weather Brains for joining us this week for our special Weather Pods Disaster Relief Telethon to support the American Red Cross. Donations are still being accepted using the QR code on your screen or the link in the description. If you haven't seen our Disaster Relief Telethon from Sunday night, our collaborative effort with all your favorite weather podcast, it is in the feed wherever you're watching or listening to this week's Carolina Weather Group episode. Before we go tonight, let's check back in. Hurricane Milton making landfall on this Wednesday night in Florida as a strong Category 3. Frank Straight's with us again from Columbia, South Carolina with the latest 10 o'clock observations. What are we seeing out of Florida, Frank?
Yeah, unmute myself. And now, there we go. You should be able to hear me. And there's the observations from Sarasota. At 9:36, they had a report of sustained winds of 69 miles an hour with a gust to 102. And since then, we haven't had any more wind reports from there. So looks like something might have happened to their anemometer there. And this is how the radar looks for the area. And we continue to see the extreme rainfall and wind occurring around Tampa Bay. Sarasota, again, getting those high winds on the backside of the storm as well, and that's likely spreading across a good bit of Manatee, Sarasota, Hardee, and DeSoto counties in Florida now, and the I-4 corridor in general across Florida getting raked pretty good as Milton now inland. It made landfall near Siesta Key earlier and is now moving roughly parallel to I-4 off to the south by 20 miles or so is where the center is located right now, a little bit to the southeast of Tampa.
What a remarkable job the WeatherStem cameras are doing as we look live again at Raymond James Stadium there in the greater Tampa area. We can see the observations that are coming with that camera, right? Because these are not just cameras, but they are also weather observation stations. 70 degrees right now, winds sustained 47 miles an hour, gusting up to 78 miles an hour. That is nearly 80-mile-per-hour winds associated with this storm. Oh, camera, where are you? Come back, camera. There it is. Let's just watch this here for just a second. If you're watching with us on YouTube or Facebook, hey, if you're listening on Spotify, you can also actually watch us on Spotify as well as listen. And you can see this camera bouncing around here and these 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. The light's still on at the stadium. I don't know if they're on the grid, if they're on some sort of backup power. One way or the other, you can see that shot here as we look at Raymond James Stadium. What an incredible sight. Jared Smith's in Charleston, South Carolina for us here on the Carolina Weather Group. And Jared, while we're watching Florida closely tonight at landfall here, there could be some residual effects from Milton in South Carolina. What are those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first most important thing is that, a lot of people hear hurricane after Helene. They think, it's going to be another long night of tornadoes. It's going to be anything like that. That's not what this is. We are very much on the dry, it's going to be very dry, honestly. A lot of people, we've been talking about Thursday for the effects of Milton, but when you look at the rainfall totals that are expected, very little, honestly. We're not expecting much. Now, there is a tropical storm warning, and that tropical storm warning goes from Edisto south through Georgia. So there is a small chance that some tropical storm conditions could occur, coastal Colleton, Beaufort County, Jasper County, in there. So you can see that's where the strongest wind gusts are going to be, 40, maybe 50 miles an hour. And so that's where our best risk of power outage is going to be. Further north into the Charleston metro, 30-mile-an-hour winds, probably a decent bet. 40-mile-an-hour gusts, especially on those bridges and overpasses. So hold on tight. It's going to be it could be a little bit of a bumpy commute, especially early in the day. We're also concerned about coastal flooding. So there is a decent chance of moderate to maybe major coastal flooding, depending on how the surge ends up Thursday afternoon. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Obviously, downtown Charleston, we sunny day flooding. It's a thing. It happens. And it very well looks like it's going to happen tomorrow. And it could happen again Friday afternoon as well, but maybe not to the extent that we see tomorrow. But not expecting any rain really on top of that, maybe some showers, but nothing out of the, nothing out of bounds, nothing that you would typically associate with a tropical cyclone. And I think the best news about this is that once Milton is gone, we have just a 5-star weather weekend beginning on Friday coming up. If you were waiting for fall in Charleston, just speaking locally here, lows in the 50s Friday morning, the first time since April. So, wow. And we're gonna have a streak of that. It's gonna be great. So we'll get through tomorrow. We'll be fine. Nothing we can't handle. But yeah, so we got grazed, and certainly, our thoughts are with everybody in Florida. And this storm is going to penetrate inland, spreading hurricane conditions across the Florida Peninsula, and we hope that everybody has heeded the warnings, stay safe. And we want to hear, that that y'all are okay. Rebuilding happens. Can't bring lives back though, so we want everybody to be safe.
Yes, absolutely. And as mentioned earlier in the show, how unfortunate it is right now for the folks in Florida, and as Milton comes ashore, and of course lots of folks may be experiencing their second tropical event in 2 weeks, especially if you're in the west coast of Florida. We know that there are lots of folks elsewhere, North Carolina, South Carolina, but also Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia, who are still cleaning up after Helene. And so we are really kind of reaping the downside that comes with that peak hurricane season, that time frame here in September, in October, where the Southeast, the Carolinas, statistically does see these storms, but even outside of statistics, what a historic, unfortunate, and impressive, if you will, systems that we've seen both from Milton and from Helene. Helene being a 1,000-year event, if not even more rare than that. An issue that we look forward to diving into in the weeks ahead here on the Carolina Weather Group as we continue to monitor the recovery efforts in the Carolinas, as we continue to understand exactly what the impacts from Helene are going to be short and long term. And as we continue tonight to look at these live pictures from WeatherStem, you can see right now, yet again, another tropical system impacting the United States. So we will keep a close eye on this, and we welcome in so many of you that have found us during this very active tropical season. We are here each and every Wednesday night with a new episode discussing weather, science, technology, and more from the Carolinas and beyond, as you've seen tonight. We have information scrolling at the bottom of your screen if you've been impacted by either one of these storms and are looking to see if you're eligible for FEMA disaster relief. Phone number, website, and all that information is scrolling at the bottom of your screen and in the description of wherever you are watching or listening from tonight. I will close out by saying that we know some of you are still waiting for power or internet to be restored. Evan Fisher telling us that in the midst of doing this conversation with us tonight, he switched over from Starlink back to their terrestrial internet there at their house in Black Mountain. So, 2 weeks after the event, stuff is still working and come back online. That's why we've been turning around the briefings that North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper and South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster have been having. If they have those in their briefing room and we get copies of those, we turn them around not only on our YouTube channel, but also on our audio podcast feed, wherever it is you get audio podcasts, because we know some of you right now are probably dealing with very little bandwidth, very little internet speed. So if you wanted to listen into those, that's something we've been trying to make available to you right here on the platform of the Carolina Weather Group. That's a whole lot to say. Thanks so much for joining us this week. It's been great to catch up with Evan. I have sent a text over to Dan Whitaker, who was live with us at the beginning of the show. He's doing just fine there in Florida. They did lose a lot of their internet connection, but he was able to get this tweet out. Some of the pictures and videos they've been seeing since Milton came ashore. He will have more for us on his platforms and on ours as he continues to track the impacts of Milton. But for now, on behalf of Frank, on behalf of Jared and Evan and Dan, I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Carolina Weather Group. See you back here again real soon. Bye-bye now.